Hey everybody, Mr. Grove here. Today we're going to talk about lipids. If I were to ask you a question, what do all of these pictures on this slide have in common? The answer could be they are all made of lipids or have been actively influenced by lipids. And so we'll kind of reference this as we talk. But what is a lipid? So a lipid is going to be a molecule that is made of a glycerol head, and it's joined with this long fatty acid. And so just like with carbohydrates, we glue them together with our magic glue, and we take dehydration. So we take an H off of the glycerol and then an OH off of the fatty acid, and HOH is water. So we've taken water away. So if we have one glycerol and one fatty acid, that is going to be what we have as a wax or a steroid if we coil that up later. If we have two fatty acids connected to our glycerol, then that's going to be what we call a phospholipid. And these are really going to play a part in cell biology with the membrane layer that allows the cell to keep things in and out. So we'll really talk about them later in that video. If we have three fatty acids connected to our glycerol, then that is going to be a triglyceride, and that is what we commonly refer to as a fat. So all of these then would be in the lipid category. So what are some things about lipids that make them unique and together? They're all very nonpolar. So nonpolar molecules don't have charges on them, and they're very symmetrical. So these long fatty acids give that symmetry and therefore that nonpolarity. Something like water was very, very polar, and that's how it was good at hydrogen bonding. But polar things and nonpolar things do not mix together. So lipids would not be soluble in water, and you know that. Oil and water does not mix, fats do not mix with water, and they form layers. And so in science, our rule of thumb is likes dissolve likes. And so that means polar things tend to be able to dissolve polar things, and nonpolar things tend to be able to dissolve nonpolar things. So nonpolarity, and that means all these lipids are going to have an affinity against water, so they aren't going to be soluble in water. Another thing about lipids is this part: they are really, really good energy sources, even better than carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, we talked about in the previous video, were really easy, quick energy sources, but fats are twice as good at storing the amount of energy. So if we go back to our picture, we see our juicy steak here, and it's got lots of fat. So this is energy that's been stored by the cow. An animal like our seal here, our sea lion, is a very fatty, blubbery animal. But that's a good thing for the sea lion, because in the cold Arctic waters, they will need to have energy stores that will allow them to get through the winter. Animals like whales, very fatty, blubbery animals that store a lot of energy in fat, which sadly for them, humans were able to utilize that same blubber to make lamp oil back in the 1800s and previous to that. And because of that, we hunted whales almost to their extinction. So these animals definitely need the energy that's able to be stored in fat. Now, you and I, not so much, because we don't really need a whole lot of fat for our energy storage. If we need more energy, we just go to the store and buy more food, or go to a fast food place and get our energy that way. So too much fat can be bad in our weight gain and obesity problems. So energy storage, definitely another biggie. Another thing to go along with the fats is we have two different kinds. They can be either saturated or unsaturated. So if you are a saturated fat, like this fatty acid here, if you notice, all of the carbon-hydrogen combos are maxed out. CH2, 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 and then the one on the end is CH3. So there is no place to fit any more hydrogens. We say it's saturated. But on this fatty acid, if you notice where we have circled, that double bonded oxygen, there could be more hydrogens there if we got rid of that double bond. And so this would be an unsaturated fat. And so these would be kind of our oils, so like olive oils, fish oils, and definitely considered to be a little bit more healthy. So in the case of our oil lamps and things, then these unsaturated fat will stay liquid at room temperature, whereas the fat on our steak or on our pork chop was more solid at room temperature. So those are some of the things with fats. They're nonpolar, they can be saturated or unsaturated, and they provide twice the energy that carbs do. And so that makes them very, very useful. And we'll see necessary as well. Let's go on to steroids. Okay, and usually if I say steroids, you probably think bad, but your body needs some positive steroids. The steroids that we associate with negative would be anabolic steroids, but steroids are just a category, and there's a lot of positive steroids out there. So for example, cholesterol would be a very positive steroid that your body has to have a lot of to be able to keep its cell membrane fluid, as well as to regulate body temperature. Also, in the steroid category are some of our hormones. So estrogen and testosterone would both be steroids, types of steroids, in addition to cholesterol, that would be in the positive side of things. But on the negative steroid side, we had two guys here. So Lyle Alzado used to be a football player back in the 70s and 80s that was really, really good. He was a defensive lineman, really big muscular guy, but he died in his 40s due to heart conditions, and I believe he had cancer. And while he was playing, was kind of an angry player, kind of had a reputation of being a dirty player. And a lot of this could be attributed then, as you see, to the side effects of anabolic steroids. Another sad story, Chris Benoit was a professional wrestler with WWE. And so he, one night, just kind of lost it and killed his family and his wife and killed himself. And sadly, violence and mood swings could be, that was part of the problem, and that could be traced back to his having the issues with the anabolic steroids. So if we go back to our picture slide, this guy right here, Barry Bonds, is the Major League Baseball home run king. And so he is also known to have taken steroids during that. And so one of the things that kind of started tipping people off was the size of his head. And people would look at his rookie baseball cards pictures compared to his later years baseball cards, and they noticed that his head seemed to be quite a bit bigger. And as we saw, one of the different side effects was facial bloating. And so that kind of tipped people off for potential steroid use, and then later he was caught. So steroids, also another class of lipids. So if we go back one last time, we're going to talk about this guy right here. And so nobody in my class recognized him from their picture, but that would be really hard. His name is Jordan Jonas, and Jordan was the winner of the TV show Alone competition for season 6. And so Jordan, if you're familiar with that show, Alone, you get to pick your survival gear, and then you go out, and the person who can stay out the longest without giving up is the winner, and you win like $500,000 or $1 million. And so Jordan, while he was out there, he killed a moose with his bow and arrow. And so he had all kinds of meat. He was eating several different pieces of meat a day. Some of the contestants had no meat, so they were eating like one squirrel a week. And so Jordan even eating all this meat, kept losing weight. And on the show, you had to meet a weekly health check, and if you lost too much weight, you were eliminated from the competition. And so Jordan's problem was he didn't have enough fat. He harvested the fat from his moose whenever he butchered the moose, but animals like wolverines kept breaking into his camp and stealing the fat. Ironically, they would leave the meat, but they just went after the fat, almost as if animals knew what they were doing. And so not having enough fat, even though he was eating plenty of meat every day, he was still losing weight. So our body has to have certain amounts of lipids to maintain a healthy nutrition lifestyle. If we don't have enough, or if we have too many lipids, then we can definitely be unhealthy. So that is the lipids, and I hope that was helpful.